Today's meeting, we have a presentation from Manny at Save the Children. He's doing a 45-minute session on where does online project management fit in kind of, you know, the future environment and where we are currently. I think the whole COVID situation has kind of obviously pushed a lot of people to have to manage their projects in an online way. So it's certainly, you know, kind of a hot topic at the moment. After that, we're going to do a lessons learned session on, again, we're actually going to do this at the last session, but we ran out of time. But, you know, kind of what we've learned in terms of managing our projects through this kind of COVID pandemic. So if you can have a think about, you know, the key lessons that you guys have learned over the last, 6 months or so. So that'd be really interesting to have a chat and, you know, kind of get some insight from not only where you have struggled, but also any positives, I guess, that have come out of managing projects remotely. So that's going to be around about 30 minutes, and we will then go on to discuss. We've got a new chair position. Maggie finished with us probably just over 6 months now, and Peter has been standing in very kindly. But we have a couple of people that have put themselves forward for the co-chair role. I'm also currently on maternity leave. I've currently got a 4-week-old baby sat on my lap, so bear with me. I'm going to have to keep muting myself all of the time. But what we are currently proposing is that rather than having one co-chair elected, we will have possibly the 2 people that have put themselves forward. We're going to have a bit of a discussion around, you know, make sure everybody's happy with that. But they're going to put forward, you know, their experience and their ideas for the group. And I think actually having the 3 of us to bounce ideas off each other will be really kind of advantageous for the group going forward anyway. So unless anybody's got any issues with us having 3 co-chairs, which hopefully you won't, yeah, we'll cover that in the last kind of 15 minutes at the end of the meeting. So unless Peter has anything that he would like to add to our introduction, I will pass across to Manny.
So hello everyone, I'm just going to quickly share my screen. So apologies in advance if there's any delays. Great, I'm going to share. Now let me just present, and I'm assuming there's no problems. I'm going to hide this, put it up here. Cool. So first, can everyone hear me? Give me a thumbs up if there's like, or like someone go on mute and just say yes.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Emanuele Militello, but everyone knows me as Manny, and I'm a training manager for project management at Save the Children International. And I'm going to talk to you about Save the Children experiences around delivering project management training over the past year. Before I start, I do want to say a special thanks to a few individuals who you'll be familiar with on this group. First is John Cropper, as part of Pyramid Learning, as well as Maggie Cord, who's now country director at Save the Children Rwanda, as well as Ashley Puchel and Francesca Ward. All 4 of these people have joined these meetings. I'm not sure if they're on today, and they've been a big part of what you're about to see. So I wanted to really say, I really wanted to say that they were part of this before we started. So I'm going to talk about where does online fit in the future of project management. And I'm going to do this by first talking about how we delivered the past 10 months of project management training at Save the Children, especially with the COVID pandemic. It certainly posed some challenges, but the fact that we made a shift to online actually before the pandemic started it actually really helped us. And we didn't expect this to happen, but we found that we were prepared for it. And I'm going to show you what we did. I told you where were our successes, where were we not successful, And then I'm going to also pivot a bit at the end of this presentation to show you some online project management training tools that you could be using to mimic some of the stuff you might normally do face-to-face. So I'm going to pause for questions, otherwise I'm just going to start. Any questions? Great, then I'm just going to start the presentation. So first of all, at the beginning of this year, we effectively delivered 3 training courses, 2 face-to-face courses and 1 online course. And then we delivered another online course in the middle of this year. And this was around the world. We reached around 340 people with the online courses and about 80 people with the face-to-face courses. So over around 420 people from all corners of the globe. So this is a truly global course, and is a statistically significant size of people, so that the data we got from people's feedback would have some value of analysis. So we split those into 2 training modalities. First was a PMM Flex, which is based off the PMD Pro, now Project D Pro Flex model, which is on the left-hand side. And the second is a PMM face-to-face, which is our face-to-face training. So PMM Flex, we use a platform called Curator, now Stream, and this is an online social learning platform where you upload videos, articles, games, and people can comment on it. And through that, they gain points, which allows them to unlock more content. And also it puts their results up on the leaderboard, so it adds a bit of competition. Now, it's important to say that PMM Flex, this online option, this online modality, was very much a social learning experience. It's not a standard, you put on an LMS, you just go through it statically. You actually have to engage with facilitators and you unlock content on a weekly basis. So it was like very much like a standard online cohort where you were part of a group of 200 people over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. Whilst the PMM face-to-face was a 5-day face-to-face workshop with games, as you'll see our Marshmallow Tower game over here, and engaging with facilitators. You'll see John Cropper on the bottom right-hand side who helped facilitate some of those sessions. So we've had 2 training modalities, online on left-hand side, the PMM Flex, and PMM face-to-face. And now we're going to explain to you how both compared. So we compared them along a number of key indicators: cost and scalability, level of effort, resources, accessibility and adaptability, and applicability, that you see that on your left-hand side over here. And so normally I shouldn't show you all the text here, but effectively we found that the online option achieved what we wanted to achieve and beat the face-to-face on many of these indicators. Cost and scalability, the fact that we had 200 participants with 3 to 6 facilitators allowed us to scale our online learning to a significant extent that we couldn't do with our face-to-face, where normally we'd have 2 facilitators for 30 to 35 participants. It was just so much more cost-effective and scalable doing it with online. Now, level of effort. With level of effort, we had participants for 6 weeks at 20% reduced capacity. That's both participants and facilitators. This is comparable to the face-to-face, where we get 5 days of training, but then also 1 to 2 days of travel. In fact, for our Sudan, we had participants had to travel for 4 days back and forth to get to our training location. So in fact, when it comes to level of effort, online is significantly lower level effort because you're not taking someone out of training for 1 week. You actually reduce capacity over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. And I think this disruptive element is often underappreciated when comparing online and face-to-face. Face-to-face, that someone can't answer emails, they can't talk to their teams, they can't do a lot of their work. Whilst with online, it's often self-paced learning, and you can choose when you go online. And that ties into the third point around resources. With PMM Flex, it can be done off your mobile, your personal laptop, or your work laptop, with a low to middle strength internet connection. So you didn't really need that many resources, and it allowed a lot of flexibility. Whilst with the face-to-face option, you had to book venues, print training materials, book accommodation for participants and facilitators, get visas, organize flights, provide stationery. So it's a lot more resource intensive. We found with PMM Flex, per participant, it cost us about $40. Whilst with the face-to-face, it costs anywhere between $150 to $1,500. And that depends on the type of, if you're bringing trainers from abroad, if you're bringing participants from abroad. So that varies, but still, the online option was a lot more affordable. Now I'm going to say these two other options, and I'm going to pause for questions so you guys can have a chance to ask about these results. The fourth factor we covered, accessibility and adaptability. Effectively, people could log into our online courses from around the world. So we had a global course with 40 countries. And one of the most interesting exchanges was we had a participant, I think from Nicaragua, giving their experiences to a colleague from Somalia. And they were sharing their lessons learned with each other. Those two people would never normally meet. Well, what we've done is we allowed to break down barriers and allow people who normally wouldn't get access. We had someone from Vanuatu in the Pacific Islands do this training, like people who, or in Afghanistan and Yemenis colleagues are super excited for this because normally they just can't get out to do these training courses, or it's too risky or too expensive. So it's a lot more accessible. But the problem is adaptability. When you have an online course, you can't really, we have to translate it into the different languages. And as a facilitation, you have to kind of pick your languages. In this case, it was in English, but we're going to translate into French, Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese. Whilst with a face-to-face course, you can just have local facilitators and they can just present in their local dialects, even if the material is in English. So there's a bit less flexibility, adaptability when you're doing online, because it's a course, you have the material present and your participants engage with it, then they respond in the chosen language. So it's just a bit less adaptable, but it's a lot more accessible. Now for applicability, effectively, participants in online, they can comment, they can upload exercises, but there's not really that immediate engagement with the facilitators. Whilst with the face-to-face, that's really one of the main benefits of face-to-face, is that you get that immediate feedback. Participants have a question, they can raise it with facilitators, they can show them, they can work together on group projects. It's just there's a lot less options for that. Now with online, you can do that. It just requires a lot more time and it impacts your cost and scalability. So those are just some of the indicators. I'm going to pause if people have questions they wanted to ask, and then I'm going to show you some of the metrics that we measured based off people's feedback.
Hi, Manny, it's Anna from TIA Frontier. Thanks.
Hello, Anna.
Sharing. Hello, just a quick question. You might be about to cover it, but did you notice a difference in engagement from participants online versus face-to-face? And the amount of sessions they attended and things they did on the course? Yeah,
what we found, which was really interesting, was that our field officers, so the colleagues who are directly delivering the projects on the ground, and our country office staff were a lot more engaged than our regional and HQ staff. And I think one of the reasons that came across is they normally don't get training opportunities. And the fact that with the online course, you just made it available, they could just sign in on a weekly basis, they can engage with facilitators. They were just a lot more engaged in it. And we suspect just from our interviews with them that it's just because they don't normally get these training opportunities. Now, when it comes to general engagement with online, we did have less engagement. We had, we'll see in a second that there was 54% completion rate for online on the first cohort of online training, but then we made some changes and we raised it to 74%. And we think part of that is because lack of accountability. When you are just on your computer screen and you don't have anyone kind of breathing down your neck, then you can't really, it's a lot easier for you to kind of let things slip and prioritize other things. And there's also just time. If people are having to work over 6 to 8 weeks and they might be in remote locations with poor connectivity, it might be harder for them to log in. And that's why we added several extra weeks as a buffer. On the other hand, with face-to-face, even though you literally get them into a room, there's no guarantee they're listening. There's no guarantee they're actually paying attention and they're actually understanding everything that you covered. Unless you do a test at the end, which is what the project you put at the exam is often a good motivator for. But with the online, the fact that people have 6 to 8 weeks to absorb the material, to learn at their own pace, that can also be a real positive versus cramming in all that knowledge in 5 days. So it depends on the learning style. It depends on the location that you're working with. Hopefully that answers your question, Anna.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just one observation, Manny. I've been doing this since about 2011 in one way or another. And what I've seen with virtual learning is that participation from women is considerably higher than with face-to-face training. Was that borne out?
Yep, we found
yeah.
Oh, thank you, John. That's a great point. Also, just as everyone just know, John was also one of our facilitators for both the Flex and the face-to-face. And what we found when we did our data analysis was that it was a lot more, it was, I think, a 5 to 10% leap in female participants, especially senior female participants. So this was female colleagues who were in more senior positions. It was a lot more accessible to them versus the face-to-face. So we did find that gender difference. We didn't do enough analysis to understand why that is the case. We can probably make some assumptions around it, but we did find that around diversity and inclusion, that the course was more accessible with the online option. And it's something we'd like to do more analysis around, but we just don't have enough data to kind of be definitive. But we did spot trends, or positive trends around more inclusive. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll continue with the rest of the presentation.
Quick one,
Brian.
So Simon Vorley from Motivation here. Just wondering, building on that, how you selected the participants. Was it kind of part of a standard learning calendar that you guys have, or was it part of sort of CPD, or how did people get to choose to take part?
So initially what we did was that for the online, we just made it open to anyone. And we think that may have been part of the reason why the engagement was a bit lower, because anyone could just sign up and there was less accountability with the managers. Where with the second cohort, it was actually part of a training deployment. So we're deploying Project PMM, which is a project manager methodology, which is our version of Project D Pro. This is part of a 2-year deployment across all of Save the Children. So we train anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 staff. So staff know now that they have to do this training as part of their requirements. So there's a lot more input from the managers saying, you guys have to complete this. So we did found that it comes and goes. Like if you give staff the option as part of their personal development, they might be more motivated. But at the same time, we made it as part of a deployment. So we got the investment from the senior leadership to say, we need to get your staff completed. And the thing is, with the online course, you also have the stats. You can say, these are the staff that didn't complete, these are the staff that did. And actually, we kind of started a little bit of competition between the country offices and the regions. Like, hey guys, why is this region has a lot more engagement than your region? And the moment you saw that, you actually found there was a bit of friendly competition, and you saw the engagement suddenly rise when you actually encouraged different countries and regional offices to kind of say, why aren't you guys as engaged? Obviously, we didn't want to make it a toxic engagement. We just wanted to, but we added a little bit of competition. But it is part of a standard deployment, just to answer your question, Simon, rather than, but we're encouraging people to tie it to the CPD, and that's part of the Project D Pro. So after they do this course, they can do a Project D Pro qualification. We've designed it so that you cover Project D Pro content as well as PMM content. So people do have this as an option at the end. Now, Brian, I also know you have a question, and I'll take your question, and then I need to progress on, so I stick to time. So Brian, did you have a question? I think you raised the hand.
Yes, in terms of, I'm Brian from IID. In terms of applicability and, group work, I'm unsure what platform you use. So, like if you use Zoom, there's a breakout facility, to bring into the presentation. I think Microsoft Teams is working on it. That's probably due in December, that sort of improvement to Microsoft. So just wondered in terms of any technology you use to substitute for face-to-face, group breakout.
That's a great point, Brian. We didn't use webinars, partly because of cost and scalability. If we included webinars, especially if you're doing a global course over about, I think, 12 different time zones, it would just be very difficult to centrally organize with our facilitators. So we chose not to on that account. And what we did, we just focused on the QA to the stream platform, where you effectively had content that people could comment on. And just like you see on a normal Facebook group or forum, others could comment and reply back to each other, facilitate, they could have a discussion over the course of several days on each other's points. On your point, Brian, it would definitely be a nice add-on if on a weekly or maybe every couple of weeks, you also incorporated webinars and maybe encourage mentorship groups. So maybe you have a group of 10 to 20 participants, because on the online course, you had 200 people on it, which is great because you get so much interesting experiences shared. But at the same time, it can be a bit hard to organize webinars. So maybe splitting up into a cohorts of like 10, 20 people and have them discuss with each other and organize it regionally within each other, that could be a nice way to actually include that webinar element. But that does add some additional costs and logistical requirements. But it's something that I think has a lot of value and could definitely make the online option a lot. It could it could increase the applicability, could increase a lot of the aspects of online to make it a lot more comparable to face-to-face. I'm going to move on just because I'm conscious of time, but any more questions, please put in the chat box, or hopefully then there'll be time at the end to also answer them as well. So were learning expectations met? So learning expectations were, did you gain project management? Did you gain sufficient project management skills? Did you learn the Save the Children project management lifecycle and tools? Do you feel more confident running projects? And with that, we got 8.4 out of 10 in our first cohort, and then for online, and then in our first cohort for face-to-face, it was 8.7. So it's actually very comparable when it comes to learning expectations. And we actually had some participants on both the online and the face-to-face, and they actually found the experiences quite comparable as well. They would like a bit more interactivity, which via those webinar options, maybe do a hybrid approach, maybe blend both the curator platform with webinars and mix this blended learning. But overall, we found online and face-to-face comparable. Now, again, online was social learning. It was where you were part of a cohort, you had the set time, you had to complete content, you got to respond to facilitators and other participants. That's just a caveat there. Now, with the second course, we actually made some adaptations based off feedback from our facilitators, such as John on this call, as well as based off participants. And we made some adaptations, and that increased it to 8.9. So actually, I think it's definitely possible to have learning expectations equal if you make with online. It just takes a little bit of creativity with the tools that you're using. Now, will this course help deliver better projects? We also found similar levels. With the orange is flex, and with the red is face-to-face. We had similar levels of agreements. Will this help me deliver better projects? Overall, most people feel strongly agree, and it's actually quite comparable, with a few people disagreeing on the online. And actually, in the second cohort, we actually managed to raise the online to 83%. So in the first cohort, roughly around 60 to 65% of people strongly agreed. And that was roughly the same for online and face-to-face. We managed to raise that to 83% for online in the second version, with some with making some adaptations. And those adaptations were mostly around reducing some of the submission exercises, so it was less overloading for participants. But also we made a shift. Initially, we just had videos and reading material, but actually we tried to put them onto Articulate Rise courses. And Articulate Rise is just an e-learning software that you use where you can have both reading content and videos, but also games. So we just made a shift from just using videos and reading material onto Articulate Rise courses, where we also had more games you could play and scenarios that people could play with. And that showed in the results, where people did feel like this was a lot more valuable to them for helping them to deliver their projects. Now, I'm going to go into here and then one more stat, then I'll pause again. But on completion rates, we found with our first face-to-face cohort, we had an 84% completion rate. With our first online course, we had a 54% completion rate. And then with some changes, we managed to raise that to 74%. This is something, if you're making the business case to your managers on why online can be a valuable resource, is because actually face-to-face, people often don't factor in that with face-to-face, it's the people who can never get to the online course, to the face-to-face course. We don't factor that into our numbers. With our completion rates for online, you'll see what people start at the beginning and at the end. But with our face-to-face, once people are there, they're stuck there. But you never factor in the people who couldn't get there in the first place. When we're doing our courses, a number of participants couldn't make it due to workload or due to the COVID situation. or due to just sudden unexpected emergencies. And therefore, actually, we had a dropout rate of 16%, which was actually much more expensive to us than the online courses, because they already had their visas, they already had their flights and their accommodation. Whilst with our online, the first round, we had less accountability, and also we had a lot more submission exercises, which was a lot more work on participants. So in the second course, we followed up with participants a lot more, and we brought the line managers into the discussion. So when it comes to checking how people are doing, we involved the line managers into this. So they had the support they needed, and also reduced the number of submissions people had to do. So therefore, there was less, you could do more quality engagement. So rather than you having to submit 50 or 100 comments and 8 submissions, you had to submit 40 comments and 2 to 3 submissions. So it was a lot more focused. And that overall, we believe, improved the completion rates. So any questions around the completion rates or about the previous stats I showed?
Sorry, Manny, Anna again. I'm just wondering, did you look at which one was most effective for increasing knowledge, even if just like self-assessment? Or was that more, you went straight to which ones were going to lead to more effective projects, which is a great measure. Just wondering if you looked at the knowledge increase at all.
So that was through the Project D Pro exams. So what we did was that we paid for a lot of participants to do the exams afterwards, and we tracked how they did. We didn't do an exam at the end, partly because time, but also because of it was just a lot of assessments. But we are thinking of introducing exams for the online and the face-to-face at the end. But what we did do was track the Project D Pro completion rates. And what we found was that overall, the completion rates was quite similar. In fact, with our online, we actually found a lot more people who got higher scores doing the online compared to the face-to-face. But I think those aren't necessarily the best indicators, because it also depends on who joins the online versus the face-to-face So I think some of the, for example, with some of the face-to-face courses we delivered was largely to an Arabic speaking audience who were doing it in English, whilst all our online participants, they predominantly worked in English. Actually, even though we had a lot of French speakers and Spanish speakers as well, and Arabic speakers in there. So I feel like it's not a complete like-for-like comparison, but we achieved similar Project D Pro results for both the face-to-face and the online. And that was one of our indicators, but we could do better. We could include an end of unit exam to do that. It just adds more time to it. Now, I recognize there's some questions being put forward in the chat box. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm just going to move on here a little bit, but I will answer you in the chat box later on, if that's okay. I'm sorry for that. How did you find internet connectivity? Again, there's a bit of a survivor bias here, where the ones who actually completed the course got the survey at the end. So this may be a bit lower with the 25% people who couldn't finish. This may be a bit more, I couldn't access the material at all. But overall, we found that most of the participants could access the content well. And that's because we made a mixture of, we made sure the videos were of very low quality in regards to size, hopefully not production value. And also we tried to make it so that the content was spread out enough. So we try to keep the content quite small megabyte wise, but also the platform we were using, the Curator Stream platform, is mobile friendly. And we actually encourage participants to go on their mobile, because often you actually have better online connectivity in remote locations for your mobile than for your Wi-Fi. And this is something that John has attested to with his work as well. So it's actually, and this is actually something that if you're looking at online connectivity, if you're doing online training, make your courses mobile friendly, because actually that's the future of our online learning. A lot of that is going online, and we encourage people to do that, because actually it's for connectivity, but also for availability. If people can just do it when they're just waiting in a car, they can do it when they're waiting for a meeting. It's quite easy to do. So, and it's also partly because online connectivity is like one of the world's fastest declining problems. Even though 40% of the world's population remains unconnected, most of the world does have internet access, especially 4G and 3G via the mobile signals. And it's something that over the coming years, more and more people can actually access and work In fact, it might be easier for a lot of staff who are in remote locations who can't actually physically get to a location, but they do have internet access. Now, obviously, this doesn't work for everyone, and and when it comes to our training approach at SAVE, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to do a mixture. We found that probably for most of our participants, maybe 70 to 80%, we can do online training. But a small portion will need face-to-face. And that's partly because of preference. Some offices, they just don't feel comfortable doing online yet. But actually what we found is, for example, Western Central Africa they were really apprehensive about doing online training. But the moment a few of them did it, suddenly the entire Western Central Africa region wants to do our online training. So actually we found that the moment a few people wanted to do it and they had success, suddenly the whole region was brought on board. But there's still a few areas that are skeptical, but also have poor internet connectivity, or they may need a trainer physically there just to guide them through, because of you may not have as much project management maturity in that area, or you may not have as much internet connectivity. So overall, we're going to go for a hybrid approach where we have the majority of our staff will be online, but a minority will be face-to-face with some online elements. And that way we can save significant costs with the online approach and have enough resource and use those remaining resources that we've saved to actually focus on the staff on the face-to-face, on the staff that might not normally be able to we might not normally be able to reach. So that's our approach, and just a few other things to consider. John already mentioned on the diversity inclusion factor, but security, I think this is something that's often underestimated. If you get staff in remote locations having to travel by car for multiple days, or staff who fly, or staff who travel by car, you put them at risk. You're putting them at risk from, like, one of the biggest risks to humanitarian and development workers is from vehicle accidents, travel accidents, but also from hotel fires. If you're staying in some accommodation, you might book the cheap hotel. Hotel fires are a genuine risk. So actually having it online does actually reduce the security risk to your staff. It can potentially be more inclusive. And also there's an environmental factor. I Save the Children, we're now being more conscious of the fact that as we don't want to contribute to the emissions by flying and driving our staff to places that will contribute to emissions that would actually act to the detriment of our stakeholders, that will actually go against the very projects that we are delivering. If we're delivering projects and climate change is actually resulting in reduced in food scarcity, increased conflict, that's quite counterproductive. So it's actually an environmental factor. And this is often not talked about when you're looking at online versus face-to-face. They just look at cost. And I think you need to take a more holistic approach. You'll start seeing now that, I haven't said it directly, but you can see that I'm a proponent for online with some elements of face-to-face. But I think people often don't look at the holistic benefits of online training. And it does offer many benefits, not just cost benefits. It does offer environmental security. It's a lot more flexible. It allows, but face-to-face does still have some good parts. As we mentioned before, with adaptability, you can change it to your local languages. You can allow staff to more closely engage back and forth with the facilitators. So there are pros and cons. And that's why we're doing a bit of a hybrid approach to go with that. And I'm going to pause there because we have about 10, 15 more minutes. Any questions before I quickly do some remote management training? If someone has questions in the chat box, if you could ask here as well, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll just respond after I've done my presentation. Great, I'll take that as a sign that I've answered all your questions, but hopefully not because I've bored you to death with my talking. So now we're going to go into a pivot from online, just our experiences doing online training to doing remote management tools. Now, one of the challenges with delivering online training is the fact that you can't, things such as the work breakdown structure or stakeholder power mapping, tools that you working within your teams or you delivering training for, it's quite normally done with sticky notes that you put on a board, excuse me, and you have people in the room physically working together, collaborating to create those work breakdown structures, turning them into network diagrams, or with the stakeholder power maps, literally putting a sticky note of where the stakeholders meet. And you can't do that the same way with online. And what we've been experimenting with Save the Children is the use of several different tools. And again, part of these inspiration also came from advice from John Cropper. So I'm going to call out John again. You're my sage, John. So thank you so much for all your support here. And we've been experimenting with different ways to actually deliver online tools. And I'm going to test you today, show you how we did it with stakeholder power mapping. Now, just a quick explanation of what stakeholder power mapping is. It's effectively tracking the different stakeholders that you might be engaging on your projects and what is the level of interest and influence. And from that, you can understand how you can engage with them across the life of your project. And normally you'd have a table here and you'd ask people to brainstorm, what are your different stakeholders? What are your private sector stakeholders, your public sector stakeholders, your civil society stakeholders, and your people and groups such as children, families, etc. And then you would put it onto a stakeholder power map here, where you have power and influence on the y-axis and level of interest on the x-axis. And that would tell you how those stakeholders are currently engaging with your projects, whether it be how you are currently engaging with them. But also you can also do a second stakeholder power map showing how you want to engage in them in the future. So let's say currently you'll have stakeholders here that have limited level of interest and limited level of influence, but you actually want to have them a greater level of interest. You want to move them into the keep informed part of this table. So stakeholder power mapping is a great tool for understanding what are the different stakeholders you have to engage with, how you're currently engaging with them, and how you like to engage with them in the future. Now, normally this will be done via sticky notes, post-it notes. It's a tried and tested tool for project management training. And what I'm going to show you today is how we've done this using two tools. First, I'm going to show you Mentimeter. So let me just bring you up here. I'm going to post up on the chat here a link here. So this is not good. Let me just post it up on the chat here. I'm going to stop. I'm going to try to see if I can pull up the chat boxes somehow. There we go, chat. There we go. Apologies. Great. So if you can all go to this link here, please. So Mentimeter is a tool that you can use. It's an online polling tool. It's free to access, but if you want more advanced features, you have to do it online. You have to pay for the pro part, which is for charities, it's about £60 a year. So if you just go to the link I put in the chat box, you can do this with your mobile or with your laptop. In fact, this is one of the real benefits with Menti, is that it works on both your laptop, but also it works really well on mobile. So you can also use this with your face-to-face training as well. And you can either go to the link that I posted on here, or you can go to www.menti.com and type in the code here. Now, can you list your top stakeholders? Someone put John Cropper there, but if you could just list your top stakeholders that you normally have in your projects. So this would be, for example, what would be the main stakeholders you have in your project? So this is just an example of a project. I just want to showcase you how you might use the Mentimeter tool to replace sticky notes. So just put in your key stakeholders that you might normally have on your projects. It could be, you could be country directors, cluster leads, youth, could be community leaders, it could be local government ministries. Just put in different names, and then what you'll see, it's automatically populating on here. And what you'll find with Mentimeter is that the most common stakeholders will actually get bigger. So you see youth here, this is becoming larger. And this is telling you that more people have put youth down. So you see, this is a very useful brainstorming tool. You're actually seeing here, 14 people have already put it in here. You can do this both over online call, but also face-to-face. And in fact, I find with Mentimeter is actually, it's a lot nicer face-to-face as well, because some people may not speak up. Some people may be quiet, or some people may need time to think. And actually, this works very well for a variety of different audience styles, especially if you think that there's some very confident speakers and some less confident speakers. So here you see all these results here, and this is a great way to brainstorm people's ideas. And you can export this as both an Excel and a PDF. So that's great. So now I'm going to move over onto the second part, which is the stakeholder power map. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do here is that I'm going to ask you, you have 5 different stakeholders, and I would like you to rank them on level of power and interest. Can you please drag for all 5 of them from 1 to 10, can you drag them how you'd rank them? So for children and families, how much influence from 1 to 10 do they have? For children and families, also on their level of interest, is it how much interest do they have from 1 to 10? And can you do that for all 5 stakeholders, please? And what you see is that this will then visualize on this map. And what you start seeing is that this is now being populated, but you can also see the spread of people's results. So you can see what your colleagues have put forward, and it doesn't average. So if you have a group of 20, 30 people and you want to get everyone's perspectives on how powerful are the stakeholders and how much interest do they have, this does an average of everyone's results, which I think is great, especially, let's say, for example, you have someone in a meeting who's an expert. And it's great, they're an expert in this field, but others may not feel as comfortable challenging what they think. This takes a group approach. This kind of does an average of everyone's feelings. It's a good way of brainstorming people's thoughts. So you see here, small businesses, there's actually a lot of different thoughts around here. You see here, with religious institutions, there's actually a lot of mixing here. So, and it's a nice way to kind of get a brainstorm of how people are thinking and feeling around stakeholder power maps. And it's a good way to replace what you have would normally be like a sticky notes and a physical board. So as you see here, Mentimeter is just one of the tools you can use to replace your standard project management tools that you might do face-to-face. And you see here, 14 people have completed here. And again, with these results, I can export this as Excel and as a PDF and share it with people straight afterwards. So it's a really nice interactive tool and an easy tool, so you don't have some poor intern. It's always the intern, because I've been that intern who has to copy all this and puts it online. It does it automatically here. And you can actually have people doing this on their phone. So if you haven't tried it, try doing this on your phone. And it's actually a lot easier to do on your phone than on your laptops. So that's Mentimeter. Any questions about Mentimeter before I quickly show you Miro? I'm just going to set up Miro.
Yeah, there was some conversation earlier about using webinars, and especially as we're all in this virtual world now. And one of the things, this works really quite well in breakout rooms. If you can get people discussing something so that each breakout room could do one entry into something like Mentimeter. And then when you bring people back into the main room, you can actually start to discover, well, why are there differences?
Excellent.
So it works really, it's very, very flexible.
And I think it was Brian who mentioned it before, exactly as you're saying, John, if you combine this tool with webinars and breakout rooms, which is currently in Zoom, but is, as I think Brian mentioned, is coming to Teams in December, I think this could be a very powerful way to, if you look at just project management training, what we've done is we deliver the curator, the PMM Flex or Project Day Pro Flex, we delivered that. And then we've done, as part of our community of practice, we have loads of participants who have been trained. We do sessions where we have them working together and trying out these tools and teaching them as extras afterwards via webinars. So we've been using webinars as part of a hybrid learning tool. But even you can do this within your project teams as well. So if everyone, you've got those links there, I've just sent you for Miro. And what Miro does is that Miro is effectively a interactive whiteboard. And you can see Anna Link here, you can see Peter Marlowe here, and you can see that I've created a stakeholder power map here. And if you go to the right-hand side, you can create post-it notes. And you can put, and I would suggest that all you take in a post-it note and put in an example of a stakeholder and put it on your Miro board, on this Miro board here. And you can zoom, I'll zoom in for you here so that everyone can see. Let me just zoom in a bit more so it's a bit visible here. And this is also good to do in webinars, where effectively you have people just put up a post-it notes, and you can drag them and drag and drop. So you can drag and drop. So as you're talking, you can say, actually, I'm not sure the UN should sit here. I'm going to move them here. And like, oh yeah, good point. It's a good way of visualizing it. And there's the sticky notes here. You can draw lines. You can do, and it's a really nice way of having an interactive sticky note whiteboards, and you can really play around. You can move around here, and you can see what other people are doing here. So you can actually see what other people are doing. And one of the nice things also about Miro is that you can copy and paste. And the reason why this is useful is if you did this with a work breakdown structure, if you did a work breakdown structure and you got all the different work packages, you could then easily just copy and paste that and create a network diagram whilst keeping your work breakdown structure. So you can easily copy and paste all the different things you do and start, or you can do breakout rooms. As John was mentioning and Brian was mentioning, you could do breakout rooms and do multiple copies. And the people can be working, you can have the different breakout groups working on the same whiteboard, but in different frames. So you as a facilitator, you could have multiple stakeholder power maps, which the breakout groups would be working on in their own groups, but then you could just jump between the ones very easily. And when you're presenting, you can just show these are the different things that the different breakout groups have done. So Miro is a really powerful tool. There's also another tool called Jamboard that you can use, but there's plenty of them out there. And this you can use for work breakdown structures, for stakeholder power mapping, for problem and objective trees. I actually find, well, I'm going to show you something we did for PMM. We did a work breakdown structure here. This is our work breakdown structure. We actually did different color Post-it notes. So it actually was more helpful for visualizing. We drag and drop, we brainstorm, and then what we did was we copied all these Post-it notes, and then we just rearranged it into a network diagram. And what you see here is that you can add lines, you can show the connections, and the fact that we could create a work breakdown structure with sticky notes at the beginning, then copy it all without having to write everything again into here is great. And you can also export this as a PDF. So again, those poor interns who have to hand copy stuff or have to do loads of effort and look terrible, you can actually export this as a PDF, and it's actually a very nice way to do work breakdown structures, network diagrams, choosing stakeholder power mapping. So that's Miro, and that was also at Mentimeter. Any questions people had around those tools? Otherwise, I'm going to pass back to the chairs. Any questions people wanted to ask around both this or my previous presentation?
Hi, yes, this is Ellie from Plan International UK. Thanks, that's really useful. Do you have any kind of list that shows what platforms are most useful for what type of different practical exercises for online training? Because that would be really useful to know, this is available, you can do this with it, this is available, you can do this. That's a great question. Me personally, I haven't created a list. I do have things. I've been just saying what I've experimented with. I would encourage people in the chat box to put down what they have done, and then we can maybe create a list that we can actually share with people afterwards. So please use the chat box to put that down. But I've just quoted what I've been experimenting with myself and what I've found works. But that's a really good question. I haven't seen any myself. If anybody else wants to chime in, please do. Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that would be really useful.
I have a question, Manny.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I find it very useful. I'm looking at Miro and how you've used it, for the work breakdown structure. I'm just thinking about possibly using that for developing theories of change. And I'm just wondering if you have experience using that for theories of change and how it worked.
No, we haven't, but that's a really interesting idea. And I think try it. And if anybody else has tried it, please comment here. But I think this could have it's a very interesting idea because you can create it. You can create structures in it. You can create visuals here that you can ask people to kind of input into here. At Save the Children, normally we use Excel Online, but also we have an online project management IT system called Prime, where we actually have now the equivalent of our theory of change, our log frames on there, and we're developing it on there. But we haven't used this for that specifically, but I would welcome people either now or in the chat box to kind of share their thoughts on how you think this might work. But I haven't tested it myself, but I think that's really interesting.
I think, you know, the tools, and there are people are putting that mural and Jamboards in the chat, and they're all, you know, they're all great. I think it's doing it in conjunction with something like Zoom or Teams, so you can talk, you know, through things. It's at first it's a little bit discombobulating when you see things moving around on your screen. You think, oh, what? And that, but once you get the team used to it, you can talk stuff through. And whilst you're talking, somebody might be adding something, and it's actually quite well, I find it a really positive experience.
Manny, can I ask you a quick question? Oh, sorry, Alison, you go.
You should know. You go first, Anna. It's fine.
Just really quickly on onboarding. So I've mainly been using Jamboards just because it's really simple, and I've needed to explain quite a lot for a long time how to use a Jamboard before we've actually been able to then use it to help people to participate. And Miro is like another level up. I just wondered how you'd found onboarding with Miro with participants, how long it's sort of taken to get people up to a point to be able to use it and able to participate.
That's a great question. I found with Miro, you have to ask you to create an account, which is a blocker. And actually, I think with Jamboard, you don't need to. So actually, think about your audience. For example, when you're working within your team, I found within my team, if you ask people to create a Miro account, they'll do it. It's fine. But if you're doing a general webinar, as you see here, some people just don't have time just to do it, and then to create that account. It's a bit fiddly, which is a shame. And I think there is single sign-on available as an option, but it does add to the cost. That's why I like Mentimeter. Mentimeter, you just need a code or a web link. Jamboard, I think you just need a link. Miro, you need to log in, and that does add a bit of a barrier. So consider your audiences. If it's a general audience that you don't directly work with, probably don't expect them to be able to create an account and log in. If it's your direct team, I think they can do a bit more effort to kind of onboard. And when it comes to IT functionality, sometimes it can be a bit fidgety at first, and it's worth asking people showing people how to do it at first. I didn't really show you how to do it. I just showed you that this is a functionality that's available, but I would suggest that you experiment with it, because effectively there's always going to be a few things that go wrong. So always try doing these online tools within a smaller group before you try it with a much large group, because you'll find that some things may not work. You may have shared the long link and the sharing options may be incorrect. Do experiment with everything you do before you share it as part of a larger webinar, because you don't want to be figuring it out during a webinar. Alison, I think you had a question, and then I might just pass back to the chairs because I'm just conscious of time.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Alison, I'm from Frontline Aids. And I may have missed this at the beginning, Manny. Thank you very much for your presentation about the online training. I was wondering what your path was to designing and then developing the course content. Did you do that in-house yourself? Were you adapting existing face-to-face materials? Did you get a third party in to help you with what was your, and then for the actual content development itself in that house, what was your path?
So how we developed the PMM Flex course and the PMM face-to-face course, at the beginning, I acknowledged our colleagues who did it, because it was multiple people. First, John Cropper, who's also on this call, was a big help. We adapted a lot of the work that did of Project D Pro and PMD Pro as the foundations of our course. And that was a really big help, because seeing something that worked and seeing how it was structured gave us a template, so then I can begin adding our own content on top. So PMM Flex is very much based off Project D Pro Flex, but we've changed the branding, we've added our own tools, we changed the content to be Save the Children specific. So we used something existing, and I think that meant that we had a lot fewer hiccups. And also we had John as a facilitator for the first round of online training. So he kind of helped us learn how to do it. And then in the second and third courses, we could do it ourselves. So I'll definitely recommend having an experienced external consultant coming in for the first round, just to help you learn what are the steps around it, because there's always going to be a few things that you just can't quite predict, and they help you with that. John has been a massive help on that. And then in the second and third, you could do it fine on your own 2 feet. But another important aspect was also having a team around you. So I developed the content, but actually when it comes to developing the methodology, I had several other colleagues who were developing it with me. And then when it comes to facilitators, we're now getting our staff who we trained as part of a global cohort, we're now having them be facilitators. So you might develop the content, but when it comes to facilitating, it's actually, you'll find that if you want to really reach that global scale, you need to be part of a wider team. And it's like, how can you recruit your colleagues in who've done the training and really get the people who've done the flex training in advance beforehand, let us see who is most enthusiastic. And one of the great things about the platform is that you can see who's been the most engaged with their comments on the leaderboard. Those are, and it even shows you statistics, it even shows you a dashboard where you can see who's been the most engaged. And those can be your facilitators that you can ask to facilitate future courses. So you can reach scalability. But with course development, just to summarize, we got an external consultant, John, to come in. We had a team to help develop content from both Save the Children as well as working with John. And then we delivered it with John. And then we are now doing it ourselves. We're doing it ourselves. So we developed that capacity now in-house to do it ourselves. So that's hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah, it does. Thanks very much.
Just a quick quick question. Are you planning to do some more courses, Manny, with this?
Yep. So we're already doing our cohort of about 350 people. No, 400 people now. We're doing just now in October and that's reaching probably about 50, 60 countries now. So we're now doing another 400 people here, and we hope to reach maybe next year. We're looking to do 1,000 to 2,000 people next year. And probably in the next 2 to 3 years, our goal is to have between 5,000 to 10,000 people covered through this training. I really think probably one of the real powers of this is the online approach is just the cost. It's significantly cheaper, but also accessibility. You can just have a rolling global course. So every 2 to 3 months, we just have this online course that people can join in from all parts of the world. And I think that's a real power of doing online training, is that you can have people do, and that's actually where webinars becomes more difficult, because if you have people sign in different time zones, you can't really do a global course. So now we're exploring regional courses where we have Eastern Southern Africa or Asia or Latin America and the Caribbean, they're doing their own courses separately. So that's answer there. I'm conscious of time, so unless there's any other urgent questions, I'll just answer them in the chat box and I'll pass it back to the chairs. Sorry for running over here.
That's absolutely fine, Manny. Not a problem at all. It's very informative and interesting, so no problem.
I'll also put my email in the chat box if people want to contact me directly as well.
Excellent. Sorry, I thought I'd unmuted myself then, but obviously I hadn't. Right, brilliant. Thank you very much, Manny. That was, as always, very informative and interesting. I do love a presentation from you. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so over to the next session. We were just going to do a quick lessons learned session. So we'd got half an hour for that, but we'll cut that down to 15 minutes. Like I say, no problems about running over, Manny. Your presentation was very informative, so I think all the questions at the end just kind of confirmed that. So what we wanted to discuss was the key lessons that people have learned through the COVID period, through the pandemic. How that's affected the way that we have managed projects, any kind of key learnings on projects, not necessarily, as I said earlier on, not necessarily all kind of negatives. If there are any positives that have come out of that, I mean, I know Manny did touch on a few things through his presentation, which we can probably elaborate on a little bit more. I think Peter is going to take a few notes, but basically I'd like to hand over to you guys and just have a bit of a discussion for the next 15 minutes about, like I say, what your experience has been over the last 6 months. So would anybody like to kick off on that? Anyone? Everybody's gone very quiet. Go on, John, go for it.
Okay, look, one of the things that I've seen in several different organizations is, there's the initial panic, which is like fair enough. It's then getting decisions taken. And a lot of people struggled, I found, getting decisions taken quickly and appropriately. Are we going to suspend a project? We need to make significant changes. What are we going to do? And then there's also dealing with it. It's something that's both a risk and an issue at the same time. It's happened, so it's an issue, but you don't quite know what's going to happen in future, so you've still got risks. And then I think there's a lot about trying to encourage teams, where possible, to maybe have a much a reduced risk management cycle. I mean, risk management is asking what might go wrong. Well, who knows? Over 12 months with COVID, but you can say, look at the next 2 weeks, the next 4 weeks, what might go wrong in the next 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. So, encouraging people to work like that. But I'd say the biggest thing has been getting the bigger changes agreed, because, you can pretty much guarantee that COVID is changes that are outside the authority or tolerance level of the project manager.
I would just add to that as well, not from my direct experience, but the experience of some of my colleagues in my team was that sometimes donors weren't particularly speedy in approving changes, which is surprising really, given the urgency of the situation. But that kind of leaves you in a bit of a limbo situation, in that you need to respond, you need to start implementing activities that are adapted or different to what's been agreed in your contract and as per your budget and narrative and whatever. But if you don't have that approval, technically you can't go ahead. So it's I heard from a few colleagues that was a bit of a kind of a barrier to implementing or adapting projects quickly and responding as needed. I don't know if anybody else experienced that.
I've certainly seen people experience that, but it's why I think governance is important, because the project manager is now between a rock and a hard place. And actually, if you've got a donor not really making their mind up, but the project needs a decision, well, actually, that's what governance is there for. But it's a hell of a lot easier to say than to do.
Yeah, I guess it's about risk as well. How much risk are you prepared to take on? Because if your if your changes aren't approved,
absolutely,
you're running the risk that expenditure could be deemed ineligible. So
yeah, it is. But it's about having that conversation at the right level, because there's also a risk about not making the changes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and just getting that conversation at the right level.
Similar to that, I think we've found some issues around working in partnerships during this time, because partners all have different risk tolerances, and a lot of the partners we're working with potentially across different countries are looking at the response in a different way, and their government is maybe saying one thing, they have a different opinion, we have a different opinion, and our government has a different opinion. So there's quite a lot of who's again, that comes back to the governance point, but whose vote wins there, or how that discussion goes.
I was just going to say, on like a positive point, and I think it was brought up quite a lot in the talk, is that we found quite a lot of like space for organic cross-country sharing of project management experience. So we were obviously meant to have like in-person training, and we haven't been as quick to creating like online training as some of you guys have, and it's really been interesting to hear some of the things in the chat as well. But in place of that, we created like a drop-in session for anyone from any of the country programs, any of the UK global programs, anything, to join. And there's been a lot of like organic discussion, not necessarily led by the UK headquarters, which is a really positive change, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good example, Lizzie. I think just kind of going, Brooke's experience again as well, which it'd be interesting to get everybody else's kind of thoughts, is, you know, the whole working from home. You know, there's been a lot of been working from home. It's the guys in country as well, and there are obviously huge pros and cons in relation to that. A lot of the cons being, you know, kind of mental health, but also reduced commute time and productivity. You know, I think a lot of people, some people have found it more positive, and some people have definitely found it quite a negative thing in relation to kind of managing their projects and being able to access other people, if that makes sense. So I don't know whether was anybody else kind of found the not going into the office and working from home.
I found a lot of people, it's been difficult for a lot of people. On the other hand, I've seen a lot of organizations being there, they're surprised they've been able to get much more done than they had anticipated. But I think it does require people to get used to some different sort of ways of working. Because it is really easy, you know, to start at 7 in the morning, finish at 10 o'clock at night, not break, just keep going. And, you pull elastic far enough, it breaks.
I missed most of that, sorry. I think my signal just dropped out. Did you catch any of what I said?
I think we did, Nicola, yeah.
Right, okay. Sorry, my signal dropped out.
Well, that's one of the perils of working from home.
Exactly. This is it.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I know 2 or 3 organizations who are now thinking about, well, what does normality mean when they come back? Because what people say they miss is the social space. But offices are not set up to be social spaces. Most of the time, they're ghastly. Just rows of desks and computers and like misery. And so I know one organization saying, well, they're actually going to take advantage of this to get a completely new office, much smaller, much cheaper, and make it much more like a cafe with some meeting rooms around the side, something like that, so that people will be more flexible. People can work from home, they can come in, but to try to, well, if what you want is social interaction, well, you better set something up to facilitate that.
But I think in some ways what we've found in our organization is that actually there's more people able to engage in spaces. So, we're an Irish-based agency. There's a lot of side corridor talk. There's a lot of people just interact with tea, we're talking, and decisions are taken in these informal spaces, or information has been traded in them informal spaces. But now it's moved to more formal spaces. So actually more people can hear the conversation, be part of the decision making. And I think a lot of people are preferring it.
Yeah, we've definitely found the same at Mercy Corps.
Yeah.
It's broken down a lot of the silos that existed, because we've got 3 kind of offices scattered around as part of the HQ, and they're all on different time zones. But all of a sudden, everyone's effectively in the same office. It doesn't matter if you live next to each other; you're still meeting virtually. And so, most of my team are in DC or Portland. But it doesn't really matter because we're all meeting online regardless. So it's actually been quite an interesting experience for the organisation.
Yeah, that's what I kind of carried on with as my internet dropped out. Is that it's almost that kind of accessibility to everybody. that, you know, even though the accessibility was there prior to this, it's almost forced it even more. So it kind of means that we're being more effective as teams, and we how positive or negative that actually is, because obviously you can find that as a bit of a being more accessible as actually a bit more of a negative. But in terms of our communications on projects, I think it's actually definitely been a bit of a positive rather than a negative.
I do think on your well-being side of things, like my organization has allowed very flexible hours. We don't have core hours anymore. People are allowed to work shift work around childcare, around family needs, around dependents. But there is the flip side of that people are online for a lot longer of the day. So they are doing different measures to counter it. But I think we know that sometimes that kind of notion of flexibility actually just creates bigger workloads. And I think the statistics are showing that women are taking on a lot of the burden of COVID. And I think that goes for our field offices, it goes for our head office across. And I don't think there has been a huge attempt to kind of tackle that. And if we look at kind of experiences from Ebola and stuff, like women's workload never really recovered after it. Like it stayed higher, it stayed both within communities we serve, but also in workloads for staff and stuff. So I think it's not really being looked at hugely in my organization yet. I know there is I suppose, a wish to tackle it, but not really the practicals yet.
That was going to be a comment I was going to make, was, has anyone got any examples of practical or tangible things that have started to happen? I mean, when John mentioned about people changing their offices around, but have there been any sort of investments? I think our organization's starting to pivot a bit now, because we realize that the issues that this has raised means we need to invest in it to create a new normal for us, rather than go back to the old normal. I wonder if anyone else has.
We have been trying to do a whole online strategy process throughout this whole period, and we have, in some ways it's been really good, because we have been able to communicate much better with colleagues overseas, and we've been, you know, been able to engage with them much more. But also we found that when you're not meeting face to face in a room, there are things that are missed, and actually it is kind of, some of it is like that kind of side chat that you have with people to take decisions, and some of it is just kind of also reading the room and how people are feeling, and kind of like the social clues that you can't get online. But we are looking at either downsizing or getting rid of our offices in future as well. But I've been trying to make it quite clear that if what we're saving on office costs isn't going to necessarily translate into you know, an actual saving on the bottom line, because we need to invest in better online communication tools, different ways of sharing learning between people who would normally, you know, have a chat and update each other on how a meeting went. How do you get that kind of small talk more formalized, and on updating our kind of databases so that we can share information with each other when we're not all in the same room, and looking at different ways of doing that. And also the other thing that we've been trying to do quite a lot is training in online tools, and how to do breakout rooms, and how to run Jamboards and things like that for all of our staff, so they can use it as part of their way of working with other people.
Right, great. Unless anybody else has got anything that they would like to add or like to discuss, we will move on to the co-chairs, or the additional co-chairs. Nobody got anything else? I think, to be honest, these obviously we've been holding kind of networking sessions when we've all got together in the past, which were really useful. But I think these lessons learned discussions might be something that, you know, again, it might be quite a useful thing to hold, maybe like a 5-minute, 10-minute session at each of our groups, a group meeting. Yeah, it's just really interesting to hear other people's experience and their perception as well, I guess, of, you know, of the situation. It doesn't look like anything's going to change anytime soon. We were actually hoping that we might be able to get in for the next meeting. We might be able to hold it, you know, at Bond, but I think that's looking increasingly unlikely, given that, you know, we're looking at that probably January, February time, which is going to be the height of winter. So obviously we'll see, but yeah, maybe that could be a plan, Peter, for the or Lizzie or our other co-chairs for the next meeting. I would like then to now move on to the election of the new co-chair. As I said earlier on, for those of you that have joined since I did the initial intro, we're actually proposing to take on 2 co-chairs. So there will be 3 of us. I'm going to continue through my maternity leave, but we were thinking, you know, if there's 3 of us, it might make life slightly easier. So we have Lizzie, Lizzie Burrow, who has very kindly put herself forward. She also works for Brooke, so I know her very well. And also Ellie Taylor has also put herself forward as co-chair. What we're going to do now is pass across to Lizzie and Ellie, who are going to give a quick overview of their experience and any ideas that they've got for the group. I think it'll be, you know, really exciting times, really interesting and good to get some new ideas from those guys. So if I could hand across to Lizzie, that would be great.
Hi everyone, lovely to meet you all on the internet. So yeah, as Nicola said, I'm Lizzie. I currently work for Brooke. My role is a project coordinator in the Strategy and Performance Directorate. Currently, my main focus is producing a suite of online e-learning tools to follow our project management approach, and as well as other sort of capacity development areas such as one-to-one support for project managers and program managers throughout the organisation. As I mentioned earlier, we run like drop-in sessions, sort of things like that, and I facilitate an online community of practice as well, and do a lot of content creation for that. And prior to that, I'm quite new to the field. I completed my master's in international development studies and did that straight after my initial degree as well. So the sort of things I would be really interested in doing with this group would just be really using it as an area of sharing such great knowledge. As the sector is quite wide and diverse, I feel like there's a wealth of knowledge from everyone, and it would be really great to kind of try and pull that together really creatively into integrating good project management practice throughout the sector. And obviously as well, I'd like to sort of develop all of our knowledge sort of through capacity development, so using it as a great sort of networking space, shared learnings and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's basically it. That's me. And it's really nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Lucy. Ellie, do you want to just yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, great to be here. So my name's Ellie Taylor. I'm a Programme Management Specialist with Plan International UK. I've been with Plan for about 2 years now. and my role is to provide project management support and programme quality support to our country offices on development projects. So I work across different donors, different themes, different areas. Prior to working with Plan, I spent 10 years working with ActionAid. So I started off in their humanitarian team, and then I worked on ECHO funding with ActionAid UK. I then was a consortium manager for a DRR project in Myanmar for a couple of years. And after that, I worked for ActionAid Palestine, where I actually headed up their fundraising and communications program. So I'm fairly new to the Bond group. I actually only joined last year, but the sessions that I've joined have been really useful. And I think, excuse me, the session today was particularly interesting. Plan's in the process of doing some work on adapting the Project D-Pro course to our Plan project cycle management and rolling that out across the Federation. So it's really interesting to hear that. In terms of ideas, I would definitely echo what Lizzie said in terms of this being a really great forum to share learning. I think there's lots of really rich experiences from everybody who joins these meetings. I was thinking it would be a good idea to maybe hear more, sort of collaborate more with some of the other Bond groups where there's crossover with project management. So that could be, the monitoring, evaluation and learning group, the disability inclusive development group, for example, safeguarding. I think there's a group also on value for money. So these are all elements that come into project management. So I wonder if we could sort of link up with them a bit more, hear from them, share our experience with them also. I think there's probably also a lot more we can share sort of going forward on COVID-19 project and programme adaptation, because this is an issue that's not going away in the near future. So I think, as the pandemic rolls on and we kind of learn more about how we're adapting our programming, I think it would be good to continue to share our learnings of what's going well and what's not going so well. I think maybe we could also look at how we're incorporating new innovations and new technology into project management. So great to hear today about kind of use of online platforms for training, but I'm sure there's lots of other innovations out there that we could hear about and learn from. And then a personal learning that I would like to learn more about, an area I'd like to learn more about, is around project management in different contexts, so particularly around commercial contracts, but also potentially consortium working, because these are sort of areas or modalities that donors are increasingly channeling their funds towards. So I think it would be useful to share our experience on those areas. So quite a sort of stream of consciousness there about different areas that I think would be useful to explore. But I think obviously it would be great to hear ideas from the wider group and members about what you would find most useful for the group to focus on. So thanks.
Excellent, thank you very much. Yeah, to be honest, the sharing with other Bond groups is something that has been at the forefront of our kind of thought process for a little while. We did do some sessions with the MEL group, but I think that's definitely something that we need to pick up again. So yeah, they're all very good ideas. Thank you very much, and I think that's something that the three of us can take forward over the next couple of years, hopefully. So excellent, and welcome as co-chairs. So with that in mind, we have our next meeting. We haven't actually got a date for it as of yet, but what I'll do, I'm going to hand over to Peter, because he has actually been in contact with a prospective presenter for the next meeting. So we have got a couple of ideas for, kind of what we're actually going to do, what the content will be at the meeting. Like I said, I think it will probably be January, February time. So what we'll do, we'll touch base with Freddie who has taken over from Amy Shaw at the end of the meeting, and organise a date for when we can hold the next session. But Peter, do you want to just give a quick overview of the contact that you've got for the next meeting?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to ask Marcus Pathan, who's the Partnership Development Manager from the APM, that's the Association of Project Management. So this is the professional organisation that basically represents project management over all spheres. And obviously project management has been, as to say, fairly late in being recognised within the NGO sphere. They are keen, therefore, to actually embrace, the NGO community, which they, really haven't been in the past. So the APM covers everybody, from IT to civil engineering to all kinds of projects, and hopefully the NGO will as well. So it'd be interesting, for him to actually talk to us about what the APM can offer, in terms of actually networking. It's got about 20,000 members. Some of whom are corporate members, and therefore, in turn have got many members themselves, that umbrella. So he can talk to us really about that, and also I think it'll be a case of listening to us, who can actually mention, what our requirements would actually be from an organisation. But as I say, it's an interesting body. I've been a member for some time now, there's actually a lot of resources available through the APM, including webinars and far more than that. So yeah, hopefully we'll have that around about the end of January, beginning of February, as part of our meeting.
Peter, it would be great as part of that if Marcus could talk a bit about chartered status, as you can now be a chartered project manager. And I don't think a lot of people know about that in the sector.
Yeah, we also mentioned that because qualifications which are specific to NGOs, such as Project DPro and Program DPro, we're hoping to get the APM to recognise those as part of a route to being chartered. So that's another interesting thing that might happen in the near future.
Excellent. I think the only other thing to ask is if, obviously, as we always do, whether there are any kind of specific requests for anything else that we want to cover at the next meeting. I mean, I think that will be a really good session, but it's just whether anybody has any specific requests for, kind of maybe if we do the usual, that'll take up around about 45 minutes. So maybe we've got about half an hour for something else, whether we hold another lessons learned session or something, of that ilk. If anybody has any suggestions, if they would either like to drop myself or Peter an email. I think you should be able to find, what we'll do is we will add Lizzie and Ellie's email addresses to the Bond project management page as well. So yeah, if you drop one of us an email with any requests for the next session, then I think that will be it. So I think yeah, we're done, unless anybody else has got anything to add. Peter, John, Lizzie, Ellie, anything?
Well, just one thing to share, that if people want to see what Curator's like, we're giving like a 15% discount on any of the courses, and they're all on Curator. So if you're interested, program management, project management, just drop me a line. There's a chance to see what it's like.
Excellent. Okay, great. Also, thanks to Manny, who I think has gone now, but yeah, I will. We will all see you in a few months' time. Thanks.
Great, thanks
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.